Well, good afternoon, and welcome to a very special webinar organised by Dean Lee and the team at Finance and Coffee on a very, well, it's topical, the concept of succession planning. I've been speaking with Dean a little while about this, and we thought the idea of holding a session around succession planning 101, particularly for mortgage brokers, is probably a little bit overdue. So we're going to try and demystify a bit of this for you this afternoon. But firstly, a few thank yous. So obviously, a huge thank you for doing. I also want to thank Empower Wealth. In fact, a little later on during the webinar, I'm going to invite Ben Kingsley, the founder of Empower Wealth, to come in and say a few words from our sponsor, as you would. And also want to acknowledge all our attendees this afternoon. Now, if you're attending this, I'm going to make a few assumptions. You're either a mortgage broker who's been in the industry for a little while and is genuinely interested in the topic of, what next, life after mortgage broking, or possible that maybe you're a buyer of mortgage broking businesses. I've done these webinars before, and often we find people chiming in who are actively looking to buy mortgage broking businesses as well, which is an interesting and unintended consequence, but most welcome to join here as well. And of course, I notice a lot of people are using AI note recorders as coming up on the attendees list, which is an interesting development. Look, I'll let you know we are recording this webinar, and I'm sure Dean will be making it more widely available. So if you want to use AI to take notes, by all means, but probably not necessary. So now we've got the chat box and we've got the Q&A. I'm just looking across to my screen here so I can keep an eye on that. While I'm going through the slides, I'll keep an eye on. But maybe if we could just use the Q&A feature. I'm happy to answer or get a bit of an engagement going in real time if that helps unlock. But also, if maybe there's a bit of information here or if things don't completely make sense, some of the concepts I'm talking about, I'm happy to do a one-on-one consultation afterwards. I'll be making my contact details available, so I'm more than happy to have a private conversation with anyone who would like to know more or even go into a little deeper in their own personal circumstances. Okay, so let's jump into it. We've got about 50 people, 50 attendees on the call already. So obviously we might as well get on with the show, so to speak. So succession planning 101. So think like a buyer. Now, the idea here being that if you get up on the balcony and have a look at your business, the good, the bad, the ugly of your business, then you'll identify things that you need to do to prepare for succession. Then once we've gone through that, we'll talk a little bit about the types of businesses. I generally categorise broker businesses into three different types of business, and it actually matters quite a bit because it depends. That drives the way the business is valued. It'll also determine the multiple that the business achieves, and a whole bunch of other things. So we'll go into that. We'll look at some of the succession options, the more common ones, and then maybe even some of the less common ones around what, and this links strongly back to the type of business that you have as well. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the steps involved, what you need to expect will happen, and what a buyer will be looking for, particularly when you go through the process. Now, for those that are interested, I've got a few rules of thumb around how we are valuing these different businesses, and a case study, which it is a sort of fictional case study. And what I mean by that is I've valued countless businesses over the last 12 months, and let's just say some common themes emerge. So I've not to breach any confidences of any of those clients that I've helped. I have generalised it so what I would consider a fairly typical mortgage broking business, and hopefully this will work online. But we're going to do a little exercise and see if we can figure out what it's worth. Yeah, let's get on with it. Okay, so think like a buyer. So the first start, and I suppose I can ask a question here of the audience is, when do you think you should actually start preparing this process? Are you, one deal away from walking away from your business because you've just had enough? Or are you a little bit more strategic and thinking 3 to 5 years out that maybe that might be the time for you to step away from the business and let somebody else take the reins? This is really important, this process, because the more prepared you are, then the higher the chances are that you're going to achieve the financial objectives and outcomes that you want. And this is your legacy. This is your business that you've been building over time. So you owe it to yourself, really, to be prepared to achieve the best possible financial outcome for you, your family, and also, and this is what I hear from a lot of brokers, they really care about their clients and their people, their staff. So finding a partner who is going to do the right thing by the clients to continue that legacy and to support staff through the change and the transition is really important. So understanding your options, we'll go through a bit of that today. Understanding also that value means different things to different buyers. And this is really important. The type of business that you sell to will have a different idea on what they're looking for. I know specifically working with Empower Wealth what type of books we're looking for. And a book that matches that fit as a good strategic alignment is likely to secure a higher multiple or an offer at all, indeed, than a book that simply isn't aligned or doesn't really fit the type of clients that we look to service. Also, your due diligence. So I've got there, inspect what you expect. So be prepared. Buyers are forensic. So they will want to dive into your loan book. They will dive into your CRM. They will look at contact records. They will look at customer demographics. And they expect that to be done in a way that is seamless. So if there are any gaps in that process, or if records aren't up to date, then that will reflect in the final offer that you're likely to get. Of course, the process of payment, the offer and acceptance, it can be done in cash, it can be done in script, depending on the buyer. And generally, the bigger the business, it does come with conditions and earnouts and all sorts of things. The bigger the business, the more rigorous this process is, and the bigger the legal documentation. Then finally, you've got to think about the process of client engagement and staff engagement. So when the deal's complete, the way in which communications roll out to customers is critical. If it's done right, it's like the customers should see it as an improvement and an uplift for them, an opportunity. But if it's done poorly, then often the clients, well, look, there's no shortage of brokers these days to maybe they go and deal with somebody else they know with because they don't feel part of that, or that maybe they were included as part of that process. And the whole reason for this really is to make sure that there is a seamless handover. So it's probably the most critical stage of the process. And of course, there's the ongoing reviews, particularly if there are conditions in the contract. There might be something around clawbacks, for example. There could be delayed payments based on certain performances being met around the book that's been acquired. So it doesn't always happen on day of settlement. Often there are lingering aspects to the deal that need to be understood. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's a couple of different types of businesses. I've got three general categories. Okay, so firstly, we've got the single operators. Generally, a single operator has one or maybe two loan writers, but typically one. And the bulk of the revenue, or pretty much all of the revenue, is from mortgages. And that is by and large the most common business structure. Now, this business could have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people operating in it. A lot of single operators are now using offshore support services, or they might have local resources on the ground that they've got, or they may even have family members that are training up and bringing through the business. But typically, it's anchored on one person. A mortgage brokerage is a much bigger version of that. So these are businesses with multiple loan writers, multiple support staff, onshore, offshore, but the bulk of the revenue is still anchored in home lending. And what we find is they might be doing a little bit of asset finance or commercial or some other revenue generating activity. And those other revenue activities generally pick up when the mortgage business falls away. But when the mortgage market is on and doing well, then they gravitate to what they know and they run with that, and that's home loans. And then finally, we've got financial services practices. So multiple staff and multiple revenue lines, much bigger businesses, more heavily invested in things like technology, systems, compliance, and so forth. And I would put Empower Wealth into the category of an example of a financial services practice. Okay, so for single operators, which I'm assuming probably the bulk of the people on today's webinar will fall into this category. The good news is if you're a single operator, you by far have the widest amount of options available to you when it comes to succession planning. And the first one actually is just to farm the trail book and just live off that and let it run down. And I have spoken to people who have actually got that plan. The challenge with that strategy is you'll be surprised how quickly it runs off. Books are running off around 20, 21, 22, 23% on average at the moment. So that income falls away pretty quickly. Particularly if you're no longer servicing the back book or writing new business to supplement at least the runoff that you're seeing. And that's another problem, because if you are then planning on to continue to write the odd loan, you've got to remain relevant, you've got to keep investing in your own knowledge, and you've got to keep your accreditations active, obviously, to be able to do the right thing and act in clients' best interests and everything that comes with being a mortgage broker today. So I'd say that, yeah, it's a strategy, but it doesn't sound like it's necessarily going to provide the optimal return in the long run. The next option I've got here is family option, and this is something that I'm seeing more and more of. So second generation family members coming into the business, or in some cases, third generation. How's that? That's how long this industry has been around. And I think this is a good option, provided, and here's the caveat, provided the family members coming in are as passionate about it as what you, the founding member or broker of the business was or are. And you can only make that call, but you know what they say about family businesses: the first generation makes it, the second generation milks it, and the third generation runs it into the ground. Anyway, there's plenty of case studies on that. You're just going to go looking for it. So obviously you've got to make sure that the kids have got as much passion about this. They're not just doing it for a reason to do something. Now, the third option I've got here, which I think is a very smart strategy, particularly for the single operators that do have a couple of up-and-coming loan riders, is if they have the financial means to do so, or if you're willing to vendor finance them in, you can definitely split up your book and sell a part of it or all of it to your loan riders over time. And that ticks a lot of boxes, really, because your clients will be familiar with your clients. They know your systems, they know your process, like how you operate, and it can provide a very smooth a strategy. But again, you've got to make sure that they're committed and that they're going to continue to do the right thing, and you've got to be prepared often, particularly on the case of vendor finance, to financially support them through that process as well. Now, finally, you've got the options around selling. Now, when it comes to selling, you can look to do a deal with another broker that you know or business. I think where you are selling to another broker generally, and that's probably the most common type of deal that we're seeing across the market generally, is a pretty safe low risk strategy. You could also look to sell to another business that maybe is looking to diversify into our industry, such as accounting practices or financial planning practices and the like. And I think, again, that's a perfectly sound strategy, provided the expectations on how clients are going to be shared across those businesses and the expectations of how that's going to work is really clearly understood up front, and there's clear rules of engagement around that. Otherwise, it can get messy in terms of this concept of ownership of the customer, and particularly in diversified entities. Now, the main method of evaluation here for single operators is the multiple of trail, the recurring income. So obviously, the higher the amount of trail.
But I've been trying to get this resolved, so yeah, that would be good.
Sorry, was that a question, Sandy?
Okay.
Hello, Sandy.
No, it's not.
That's all right. I might get you to go on mute then. All good.
I thought I was, sorry. I can't find me.
No worries. All good. So multiple of trails, main valuation, and to pump that up, clearly you've got to look at things like lower runoff rates, which is all about client engagement backbook, and also the quality of the demographics and the quality of the book itself is really important. Now, some other observations. So, and I've seen this happen. So bigger books have a smaller pool of buyers. What I mean by that is if your book is, say, 500 million in size and generating, I don't know, north of 700,000 a year in income, then that's going to attract, let's say, $2 million purchase price. And there is not that many smaller operators out there that can afford that, let alone to service a loan to pay that back. So what I have seen done by a number of operators is selling off chunks of their book. Maybe there's a component of clients on your book that you just haven't been able to get to or service. So you can sell a percentage of your book. Now, the trick to doing that is making sure that the person you sell it to, that the rules are very clear around referring those clients back to the buying broker. No one's going to come in and pay a premium to then be white-handed in the process with those loans being written behind the scenes. Trust me, it's been done, and I'm sure it will happen again to people who aren't onto it. But I think the industry's wised up to that. So if it's not a genuine retirement, there's real risks for a buyer, particularly if that broker is continuing to operate. Smaller books are unattractive to larger buyers as well, so equally, because the amount of work that has to go into doing the due diligence and engaging with those clients and so forth, you've still got to go through the legal process and all these bits and pieces. So bigger buyers are looking for books that have got a more sizable income stream so that it's worth their while. I've already mentioned vendor finance, so I won't go there again. Probably the other bit, this is probably the only comment I'll make on business brokers too. There's a lot of people, business brokers out there. You've just got to do a Google search and you'll find them. There's a few that seem to be specialising in our industry. I've seen some business brokers that have come into this industry, but they've got more of a generalist background, so perhaps they don't fully understand the mechanics and ins and outs of our industry. So you really need to pick your business broker well, make sure they really know how the mortgage broking industry works. And secondly, there are others out there that are acting like a sort of pseudo marketplace where buying and sellers and that, where the fees are paid for by the buyer rather than the selling broker. Look, I don't know why anyone would make a bid for a business without doing a little bit of due diligence first. And so I'm personally not really convinced on how sustainable those models are going to be in the long run, but time will tell. I think business brokers will act like a business broker. They will talk a big number to get you interested and to get you on board. They'll generally charge a fee to get the prospectus or the information memorandum pulled together and documented. And they'll charge a percentage of the sale amount, which could range from anywhere from 5-10%. But the risk with business brokers is if it's not positioned properly, that the book just doesn't sell, that you'll go through that process and it'll sit there for 6 months. And I've seen some businesses sit there for a long time and then get delisted because they just couldn't attract the right sort of person, or identify who the right buyer was that was prepared to meet that price because it brought something into their business that justified a premium. But anyway, I think we could have a whole nother PD day or webinar on the value of business brokers. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. Now, I'll just quickly talk about mortgage brokerages. So where you've got larger mortgage broking businesses, as I've said already, the strategy around selling to your loan writers is a really good one here because you've got multiple loan writers coming through the business. And you know what? If they're any good, why wouldn't you bring them on as a succession plan? Because if you don't, they're probably going to go out at some point, leave and start up in their own right. So giving them skin in the game is a great idea. You've got the option of selling or merging your business with another broker, or those businesses more likely in the case of wanting to do some sort of strategic partnership with another business looking to diversify. Now, when you're in a business of this size, so these businesses could have loan books, big loan books. So the expectation here is whilst the stakes are getting higher and the multiples are probably getting higher, so too is the scrutiny and the due diligence effort and work that needs to be done to complete any M&A transaction. So just be aware of that. You know, it's the risk reward for running a bigger business is there will be more scrutiny. So you've got to be prepared for that. And similarly, if you're a financial services practice, so and I can use the Empower Wealth example here because it is public. You know, AFG invested and bought 20% of Empower Wealth. So that process was a 9-month process and there was a lot of scrutiny. and backwards and forwards, and a very, very rigorous process. In the case of the financial services practices, we're now looking at the financials, and it's a multiple of earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization, or EBITDA, for those that don't know that acronym. And typically for our industry, it starts around the 5 times, but can go a lot higher than that, particularly if it's a bigger national business. Typically here too, it's not just a cash deal. Often you're looking at script, shareholder exchange, and also earnouts, particularly if the founders are looking to exit the industry. So good news is you're in the driver's seat when it comes to your succession plan. So I think what I've heard from a lot of people that I've spoken to in the industry too, that sort of holds them back, or maybe causes them to delay getting ahead of the curve when it comes to succession planning, is they wonder, the question is, well, what do I do next? And the good news is it doesn't have to be a complete exit from the industry. There are options available to you to help you transition. So you might say, actually, I've got another 5 years left in me, but maybe now is a good time for me to sell and to continue on as a loan writer of the business that I have sold my business to. Or I act as a referrer or a spokesperson for that new business. And maybe there's some financial incentive created around that. But the point is you need to work out your timelines. You need to work out your what's most important to you and what you're looking to achieve. I've met people when I've said, okay, what are you looking to achieve on at this point in time? And I've got some people that have just literally want to dump and run. And what I mean by that is, look, I've had enough. I want to retire. I want to move on to new projects. I just want to sell and I want out. And I don't even want to stick around. That's good, but it's also not ideal for the incoming owner of that business, because if the original owner is up and gone in a short period of time, then that makes that the risk of engaging the clients and bringing them on board with the new business is more challenging. And that will be reflected in the offer price. Similarly, you've got those businesses where you've got people who are prepared to stick around and work for a while. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 12 months, maybe it's even 3 years or 5 years, who knows? But the more you're prepared to stay and work with the acquiring business, then that will reflect positively on the multiple, because it de-risks that client run-off risk. Obviously, you've got to be prepared. You have to share your financials, your commission statements, and information that is available from your CRM, whichever CRM you're using, to help the business that's looking to acquire yours really understand who the clients are, how you operate, the ins and outs and the financials of the business. So often the first step in any process is to get a non-disclosure agreement in place between you and the party you're talking to. A mutual NDA gives protection to be able to share information, confidential information about the business, so that informed decisions can be made. And clearly setting out timelines as well, particularly around the client communication strategy, as I mentioned. So now what's unique to Empower Wealth is we do have a stay on strategy. We encourage our brokers that we've been talking to and the business that we've bought to stay on as brokers of ours under our model, allowing you to continue to earn a good income whilst receiving a lump sum for your business up front that fairly recognises the value of what you got. In actual fact, it's quite rewarding because it will, over time, end up enhancing the overall multiple that the broker achieves. So that's something that's unique for us. And I'm aware of other businesses that provide spot refer arrangements if the outgoing broker is prepared to stick around and continue to steer clients back. So there you go. But the good news is you have choice. Now, the key steps in the succession process. Typically, what will happen after the NDA or the non-disclosure advice is in place is the business valuation. So it's a high-level valuation using your financials, using your commission statements, and whatever else information that we can get together. And there are various models apply that can do this, but it is to form a view and get both parties on the same page in terms of what we're looking at here. And often, you know, we'll quote a range based on certain assumptions. Once we then meet eye to eye, I suppose, and are comfortable that we're on the same page, then it goes into the full due diligence where we're looking at things like operational efficiency, systems, processes, a deep dive on the client base, down to the individual loan client record level. And once we come through that, that will then finalise that valuation and all the assumptions that were made during that stage. At that point, if everything's looking really good, then we go into the contract. You'll go into the full sale agreement, purchase agreement, and so forth, and any remaining due diligence items that need to be ticked off. Now, that process could take anywhere from a week to a year, depending on the size and the complexity of the business. And how many resources you're prepared to throw at it. Of course, you can also, and highly recommended, that anybody looking at selling business gets professional advice. So you need to bring in, you know, your trusted advisors, your accountants, your legal team, solicitors, and financial advisors to make sure that the financial position for yourself is where it needs to be. Can't really comment on it more than that, other than you need them. You got to have them, and so that's going to cost as well. But you know, you only get one shot of this, so you've got to do it right, and you've got to have the big guns in your corner. Now, rules of valuation, sort of touched on it already. Single operators, multiple of trail. And look, I've valued businesses in the last year anywhere from 1.8 times trail to over 3.5, 3.78 actually, I think was one. And as I mentioned, that is all because each of those businesses had different attributes. Some look great, some didn't look so great. One was running off over 35%, and as a result, it got a very low multiple. But the books that we like, you know, align closely with the types of books that or the book that we have. And so we know that the chance of those clients engaging with us is much higher, and therefore we're prepared to look at paying a premium above market. I would say the average over the last year, and I do track book sales, business sales, and keep a record of them. Generally, I think you can, the 3 times is probably about the market average. You know, I have seen some go for higher than that were unique. And some I'm even still scratching my head as to how they even got that multiple or how they convinced someone to pay that. So I think they're more the exception than the norm. But I would say, you know, 2.5, 2.8, 3 times is generally the range that I've been seeing, particularly anyway. Now, the mortgage brokers, they could be a trail or EBITDA method, depending on size and or where they're at on the maturity curve. If the business is really mature and the financials are looking pretty good and the systems are there, it's all pretty stable, then an EBITDA model approach could apply. But if it's still relatively young or if it's in decline, then we could be looking at trail with a combination of the financials to land on a number. And in the case of a practice, then EBITDA is the main number. And I think I quoted 5 times earlier. Look, you can go and have a look and see what REA paid for Mortgage Choice, and you'll find that the multiple was significantly higher than that. You know, that was quite a national branded business, franchise business. So they got that valuation reflected the value that was inherent within that business. Okay, so quickly, case study. I promised we'd get to this. This is where you get to do a little bit of work, or you can. I'll keep an eye on the chat box and the Q&As. Look, I've got a few. There's people been jumping in the chat box. So anyway, yeah, please use the Q&A feature if you've got any questions. Metro Sydney Western Suburbs loan book of 300 million, net trail of 500,000 a year, and approximately 42K per month, which is holding. And what I mean by holding, it's been consistent for the last 6 months. Annual settlements of 70 million, upfront net commission of 400,000. The owner's OPEX, so what they're drawing from the business, what they're using to operate the business, excluding their personal drawings, is $500,000. So puts it around a 45% net profit margin with 700 active clients, 100% word of mouth. So they don't pay for any marketing. They don't pay for any advertising, and they don't pay any referral sources. The database has a further 3,000 prospective clients and past clients that are not currently customers of the business. There's 9 FTE, 3 loan writers, 6 admin, 4 of which are in the Philippines, and it's all work from home. So there's no retail office, no lease, no rent. And it's all 90% mortgage lending, of which about 3/4 of it is PAYG. So there you go. That is I would say, 8 out of every 10 businesses I look at, that's a pretty accurate reflection of what a mortgage broking business that I've been looking at looks like. So my question to you guys is, well, what else do you need to know in order? So this is where you think like a buyer. If this was your business, or if you were looking to acquire this business, what additional information would you seek from the vendor to help form your valuation? What assumptions have you already made about this business that you would need to validate? And based on what you know, which I think we know which valuation method applies here, because it's pretty much a single operator. What multiple do you think it's worth? What would you pay? Do we have enough information to be able to form that opinion? And the reason why I say this is because when I ask people, this is something that's quite interesting, right? Someone says, I want to sell my loan book. I go, okay, do you know what it's worth? Do you have a sense of, I think it's worth 4 times. And I'll go, okay, tell me a bit more about your business. What's the mix of lending? What's the client demographic? And often I get generalizations. I don't get specifics. And this then tells me that the person who is selling, who has an idea of what it's worth, really doesn't have an idea of worth because they don't know these data points. You need to drill into the mechanics of what your business is in order to work out, and you also need to know who the buyer is and what they're looking for in order to work out how to price it. Okay, so just got a question here from David Hoare. Some aggregators mandate that only brokers who also aggregate under them can buy a book, AFG, for example. Look, every aggregator's got different rules and policies. Obviously, the franchise models have got their own. AFG has another set of rules. What I say to anyone is, if you are going to start thinking about this process, probably one of the first people you should be consulting with is your aggregator. And certainly you need to be going through your contract with that aggregator to read the fine print to find out what you can and can't do when it comes to selling. And as I said, you also need to have your advisors, your own legal team in your corner as well to make sure that your interests are protected. Okay, so have we got anyone out here prepared to give me an idea on what this business is worth? Come on, you can jump in. You can unmute yourselves if you want. We can have a conversation about this. I'm keen to get a bit of dialogue going here. No? No one, no? Mark. Okay, so Mark, you've come in at 3 times. Okay, so that would put it at about 1.5 million. So based on that net trail of 500K per annum, it's a good starting point because that's sort of what I said earlier, right? I suppose, what if I told you that this broker was planning on retiring and not sticking around, but their partner, who they had a long-term, spouse or relationship, is also a mortgage broker operating next door, or not next door, it's work from home, but continue to operate as a mortgage broker in the industry and has no plans of retirement. So if you knew that piece of information, would that change your valuation?
2 times.
You dropped pretty quickly there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty important piece of information.
It's a critical piece of information. You've got to look at the related parties, particularly also if they are who are their referral partners, who have they been referring clients through, and the rights of ownership around those clients. It's a really important topic. You can protect yourself in your purchase or sale agreement too around that. And I think anyone selling, if you have a potential conflict here where, you might think that there is a risk that a buyer won't pay a premium because there is some related party that's continuing to do something, you can put clauses into your agreement to ring fence and commit and say, look, we will continue to do these things. Of course, there's an element of, people doing the right thing here as well. But for the buyer, if you sense that there's a real risk that you could be, I call it white-handed by the outgoing broker, then you're probably even just going to walk away because you may not even make an offer. And look, it's just, it's just a classic example, right? If it's a genuine retirement, and or the outgoing broker is prepared to stay on and work with the buying broker to help transition, then you're going to see that 3 or even a slightly higher multiple if it's a good fit for that buying business. So, well done. Do we have any other questions or thoughts on this?
Yeah, with the database that has a further 3,000 prospective and past clients, I'd want to understand how they're going to be treated, whether they're the property of the purchaser or the seller.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would expect to be selling the data associated with the active loans.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on this. Right now, here's an interesting observation. So one of the businesses I saw get sold for a much higher premium, it looked like the trail book had sold for 4 times, but it actually wasn't a 4 times trail book sale. What the broker had done was bought the loan book for 3 times, but then paid an extra premium for their huge database. It was a marketing premium that they were paying. The opportunity to contact and market to these clients, they saw as a better option than maybe spending, I don't know, X dollars on maybe doing some sort of digital marketing or advertising campaign. So if you can see that there's a brand, particularly a brand that's well known in a local market or a large database, it's worth looking at that as a separate valuation exercise over and above the book, and then you combine that into the overall sale price of the business. Does that make sense? What else have we got? Better off selling in smaller parcels may increase the multiple given also ongoing stuff. Yep. I touched on that. That was from Brandon. Yep.
Hi, Sam. It's Brad here. I think I heard. I'm sorry, I'm driving in a car, but I think I heard you say that the loan trail book had been steady for 6 months at, I think you said 500, right?
Yeah, it was about 42K. Yep.
Does that put up any red flags for you in regards to it not growing at all? In other words, they maybe potentially, if they're running business, they'll have then potentially quite a bit of drop off, given that they're probably writing new loans at the same time.
Yeah, well done, Brad. You're onto it, mate. So the fact is if you work out what the upfront actually matches the monthly trail. So what you're seeing here is a book that's already in retirement and probably hasn't been actively worked. So even though it's got 3 loan writers, it's got incredibly low productivity at 70 million a year for 3 loan writers. And so then you go, well, hang on, are these loan writers commission-based or are they employees? Oh, they're employees. Employee brokers typically write 30, 40, 50 million a year on their own. So what's going on? So again, it just leads you down another line of questioning to understand the health of this business. But where you see monthly trail and monthly upfront commission pretty much for a mature book, and this is a 20-year book, you'd ask more questions, right? You want to know what's going on. How well engaged are those 700 active clients? What's the risk of runoff? And then when you think about that and you go, hang on, there's no paid marketing, no advertising. How did they get that database in the first place? And that's where you go back 3 years in the financials, and then you see that there used to be a lot of marketing. There used to be an office. There used to be a shop front, a presence, and there used to be referral sources, but they've all gone. So this business has been managed down to a really low cost base, and it's got a nice sort of 45% profit margin. How much money am I going to have to spend to uplift that to get the engagement? Right. So again, it's all related. So well done, Brad. You're onto it.
G'day, Sam. It's Richard.
Richard, how are you?
Hello, mate. I'm great. Mate, what about the percentage of loans or the book that are in the clawback period?
Yeah, loan aging is critical, and you can often, when you look at the financials, you can sort of get a feel for that pretty quickly, just by the level of activity that people are putting through. I looked at a book where the upfronts, I couldn't work out why the book hadn't grown as large as by which the amount of the upfronts had been for the last 12 months. And it turned out that he'd literally rewritten his entire book in the last 12 months, which of course will overinflate your upfronts, but all the loans were sitting inside 2 years. Massive clawback risk. I just walked away from it. Didn't want to know about it. That looked like a dump and run strategy that was a landmine for whoever was going to buy it.
Can you put some sort of mitigants against that by holding back some of the payment, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Is there ways you potentially?
100%, mate.
Yeah.
You would do that if you really liked it. If you thought those clients were actually I can do well with these clients, then you would say, I'm going to pay you, let's say it was the 1.5 million, but I'm going to pay you, I'll pay you $1 million now, and I'm going to hold back $500,000 in 2 years' time on successful completion. And any clawbacks will be offset against that residual 500,000. You can do that. Or you could have an agreement where you agree to pass on the cost of those clawbacks. Good luck with collecting it, though. If once that money's left the door, it's generally gone. But similarly, this is where I say, if that broker's prepared to stay on and continue to work with you, then maybe there's a way around it. But I do like that sort of earn out idea.
Yeah.
particularly in that scenario.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sam. Ta.
Yeah. Okay, so Matt Carpenter's got 3 loan books with 3 different aggregators. Gee, I thought moving one aggregator once was painful enough. Gee, you must be, mate, that's, I'm sure there's a story there, Matt. Maybe you and I need to have a chat about that one. It depends on the aggregators and what you're looking to do. You may need to, if you want to bundle up as one, you know, it will come down to who those aggregators are and what those old agreements look like. It's also difficult because you got to think about the banks that you've got those loans sitting with as well, and how supportive they're going to be when it comes to transitioning as well. Cool. And Adam, thanks. Yep. What have you got? A couple of questions. There's a number of 5-star Google. Yes. Google reviews that all get looked at. So very important. So good. I didn't mention that at all. But I think absolutely social media. I think the thing with social media, what I'd say to you is, yes, having a presence, having a footprint, because we are in a digital world and you know where the world's heading with AI and everything. So we've all got to double down on that if we're going to stick around and survive the transformation that's going to happen over the next 5 years. But don't go stupid with it, because I've seen people burn a lot of money, particularly on trying to buy leads or get leads through social channels. You know, I think that's another topic for a whole nother day. And I've got some pretty strong views on it, to be honest. But I think we need to double down on what we can do to deliver trust. Trust so that the customers continue, because I think in a digital world, it's getting increasingly difficult to know who to trust. But brokers play a great role in being there as the trusted advisor. And what are the sort of positives, sorts of demographic buyers are seeking? So look, I think if you were running, look, we run. In fact, actually, I'm not going to answer that one for Empower Wealth. I'll let Ben, who's going to come on in a second and say a few words, answer that. We know what sort of clients we want. If we were a commercial brokerage, for example, we're going to want self-employed clients. But we're not. We're a wealth advisory business. We're looking for PAYG, people that want to invest. So the type of clients that we're looking for are going to be different again. So anyway, look, I think, given we're almost out of time, I'm going to invite Ben Kingsley to jump in now. A word from our sponsor. Sam. Hey, Ben, where are you, mate? What do I need to do?
No, hopefully my camera's on and people can see me.
I'll stop sharing. And hopefully you're online now.
Yeah. I've been listening along for the last 20 minutes, so it's been an interesting conversation.
Well, it's we're just trying to demystify something that's very topical right now. So and on that, Ben, I'm sure a lot of people got absolutely no idea about Empower Wealth. Mm-hmm. What you and the team have been able to build and create here is something quite special. I've spoken about large financial service practices. Maybe you want to give us a little bit of an idea
sure.
of it.
We're a holistically whole of wealth advisory firm. We predominantly have built our business off the back of helping people secure existing residential properties for investment purposes. So we've built a lot of education and knowledge around how that plays out. So we've got a mortgage broking business, property advisory business, buyer's agency business, financial planning business, and a tax business. So hence that whole of wealth advisory firm. Our business has basically started all the way back in 2007. So we'll be coming up to close on 18 to 19 years and celebrating 20 years in 2027. The business from a brokerage point of view, we do about 1.1 billion in settlements per annum. We've got a team of about 40 in the mortgage broking team. But, you know, our purpose and our mission is we want to create 10,000 financially free households. So everything that we focus in on is about investing into our technology and our people, trying to get a sense of their clients' next goals, and over time building out that financial journey for the client. So, you know, most households just want to make sure that they're okay. There are some households who want to try and achieve gold medals in terms of the wealth they can build, but predominantly the households we like to help are they're going to buy 2 or 3 investment properties plus their super, and live pretty comfortably in retirement with a nice little passive income.
And Ben, you've had a bit of experience of buying loan books over the journey as well. Have you got any pearls of wisdom you'd like to share with the audience?
I think the most important one for us is it's got to have a fit around what we're trying to achieve. So the audience profile needs to be really important for us. That, you know, we deal with aspiring Australians, so we deal with people who are interested in basically letting their money work harder for them, and they're looking for advice and support around that and guidance over the next couple of decades. So rather than sort of just being a classic mortgage broking business, where, you know, in essence, no one really wants the debt. They want the product or the thing that the debt buys them, i.e. normally the house. So we talk about the example of going to a hardware store. They don't want the drill bit. They want the picture hanging on the wall. So the profile for us is usually 30-something to 50-something in terms of age profile. Usually, if they're going to take on additional debt, we want to make sure that they're got reasonable incomes, they've got good understanding in terms of what they need to be doing and the obligations that they have as part of the debt they're taking out to create or accelerate their wealth outcome. Doesn't really matter where they are. We service clients all around Australia, and we bought books in Geelong, Melbourne, even Central Australia for that matter. And so part of our value proposition and what we're also then looking for is, because we're a whole of wealth advisory firm, we don't have any referral partners. No one will refer into us because they're maybe a bit worried that basically that, you know, the customer will bring all their services across to us. So we look for businesses that have direct relationships with clients, that potentially don't have existing relationships with financial planners or accountants and what have you, and just easier ways to then bring them on board and then, you know, do a whole of wealth review on them, and that then obviously allows us to get started in terms of building that out. For some reason, I've just lost my camera. I'll see if I can
still hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, good. So thank you. You can still hear that. Yeah, so that's sort of the process. I don't think people need to see me anymore. So yeah, that's, you know, they're the sort of things to look for. It was interesting in terms of the dialogue you had about the quality of the book, the data. We're huge on data capture. We have our own platform. We capture an enormous amount of data around household finances and also around their property data. And so, you know, coming in as part of a value add, one of the things that we have noticed lately is there has been businesses who might be a couple of years away from retirement, but they do want to do more than what they're currently offering their clients. And so that's the model that you were talking before about, where we're basically acquiring the business, but we're keeping the broker on. So they get a nice little upfront, pays off their debts or puts it straight into super or whatever they do. But they then they're then paid salary from day one, and then ultimately are able to continue to keep servicing their customer. And from our point of view, that then helps with the opportunity to value add services. And in some cases, that gives us an opportunity to look at what we can pay, because if it's just broker business to broker business, then you're totally reliant on potentially the broker revenues and the opportunities to serve that customer. In our case, there's tax returns that we do every year. There's potentially insurance policies for income protection, trauma, TPD. There's ongoing super management as part of that solution. So I think when you think about all those types of things, that's sort of, from our point of view, it starts with the right client demographics, and then we go into profiling the quality of the book, the reputation of the people that work in the business, and we will move up and down the scale of multiples based on a combination of those things.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, Ben, thank you, mate. And look, we are at time, people. In fact, we're 1 minute over, and we can see a few people have had to drop off already. So once again, thank you, Ben, for sponsoring today. I think it is a really important topic. It doesn't get enough attention, I don't think, across the industry. Obviously, I'm invested in this as a director of M&A for Empower Wealth, so I'll have to disclose my interest. Look, if anyone wants to reach out, there's my email address and my phone number. As I said earlier, I'm happy to have a private conversation with anyone that wants to dig a little deeper. Happy to have a private conversation. And a huge thank you to Ivis, who worked behind the scenes and kept me on track when I was off track. So thank you, Ivis. And of course to Dean and the team at Finance and Coffee for hosting today. I think, hopefully there'll be more said and more shared on this very topic. Good luck, everyone. Good luck with your succession planning.